Just bring up my control panel here. So yeah, first of all, just to add a couple things to Chris's presentation, I actually am a professor at Olivet Nazarene University currently. I actually studied at Northern Illinois University. If any, now the other part of my presentation, my day job is to work for Phoenix Contact as a product specialist. And in case you're not acquainted with Phoenix Contact, most people only have kind of a passing understanding. We may have seen like our power supplies or our wiring products, but there is quite a bit behind the name, the brand name. I just wanted to just tout, for instance, that we've been around for 100 years now. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary just this year, and if you are curious about the story of Phoenix Contact, how it started as a maker of wiring blocks, but then eventually over the 100 years become what they are today, active in every aspect of making a control panel, and in fact getting into topics and subject matter such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT. There is a paper you can read talking about our history. When you get these presentations later, just click the link and have a read about our history. So, I think that most folks who are familiar with Phoenix Contact are aware of our different wiring products, our connectors, cabling, maybe our lighting. We're also into power supplies, big time energy monitoring. We're getting into safety, motor control, and then the part of the company that I work in is the automate side of the business. So wired and wireless Ethernet products, industrial PCs, straight up PCs, cloud computing. We definitely have a very high-tech aspect of the company that most may not be familiar with. So, I'm here to talk about CODESYS today and how CODESYS has really helped out a lot of companies, but I just wanted to help understand, in case you didn't know who Phoenix Contact was, a little bit about where we intersect with CODESYS, and that is in this area here of our PCs and computing devices. So just to hone in on a few of these particular products, which will be the kind of the crux of the stories that I'm going to be telling today. We do have our PLC Next product, which is kind of our next generation controller. This is a device that's capable of running both CODESYS as well as our own native programming software called PLC Next Engineer. And it has a few other programming options that I'll mention here in a little bit. But that is part of the crux, really the official part of where we intersect with CODESYS. But we also do have a couple of other devices which will come into play in some of the stories that we're going to tell. And the one is the Nano line, which is a programmable relay. So it's kind of a below a PLC. It might be similar to the Omron Zen or the Eaton Easy Relay or the Logos or that sort of thing. Then we've got our web panels, which are an HMI type device. It displays the visualization, but what a web panel does specifically is that it displays an HTML5 based visualization. So for instance, what CODESYS does with their WebVisU software, their add in their feature there, this type of web panel can display screens that are built in WebVisU. And then we also have quite an array of industrial PCs of both box type and incorporated panel type with a number of OSs, everything from Linux to various flavors of Windows. So we have a number of these different products that we have, and this is kind of the basis of some of the stories that I will be telling you. So just a little bit more about the PLC Next platform. Uh, you know, it's an open platform, and as such, it underlies just a lot of the applications we've been working on for the automation industry, but also for educational purposes. If we're wanting to introduce a student to C Sharp, C++, Python, Node-RED, languages like that, that they may have learned some already as part of their general academic program. The fact is that these types of languages, there's definitely a trend, a preference towards wanting to use these types of languages in a programming environment. And so the platform that we have, while it is suitable for CODESYS and for PLC Next technology, you can also use some of these other languages either instead of or actually in conjunction with CODESYS or PLC Next Engineer. You can create different programs that could utilize all the strengths that you can get from CODESYS, from the structured programming approach of ladder or structured text, or you could bring in along with that some of the capabilities of what you could do with Python or Node-RED, for instance, to make a really interesting system which can do things that we barely even dreamed of just a handful of years ago. So my topic here today, it's going to be far less technical than what Russ did. I said I'm more of a cheerleader here for CODESYS and the way that they've just helped out a number of companies who were struggling with supply chain issues. I think everyone on this call is aware of the fact we dealt with a certain disease outbreak a few years ago, which kind of shut things down for a while, impacted our supply chains. And, even now, this is still something that we're climbing out of and working our way out of. And certainly we as a company had quite a few issues of our own. So as I run through some of the stories I'm going to be telling you here today, I am not going to be, my purpose will be to promote CODESYS and how, they, how they helped. I will be talking a little bit about how CODESYS' ability to run on just about anything kind of helped customers solve supply chain issues so they could still get machines out to their customers. But I will not be naming any names of, who was unable to ship or whatever, because that's not really the purpose of my talk today. So it's to promote and hold up and not to denigrate anyone else. So it will be interesting to see how this goes today. As I was apologizing with Chris a little bit earlier, my plan today was to have a couple of these customers on the call with me so they could talk more about their specific applications, why they chose CODESYS, and then to handle questions that might come up about their applications. Unfortunately, when you work with companies that are cutting edge, doing interesting work, sometimes their business takes over and they get a little busy and I have to make some hard decisions. So unfortunately, my two companies that were going to join me kind of dropped out yesterday and said we can't do it. So I am going to be trying to fill it a little bit. And I just warning you, Chris and Timothy, I may not use my whole hour today, but we will try to go into some detail about where some of how some of these applications worked and why we utilize CODESYS. So my first success story I was going to talk about today is Electro Controls. They are a system integrator, and they gave me permission to use their name and talk about their work. One of the issues we find as we work on some of these cutting edge applications is that an integrator or a machine builder doesn't necessarily want to let their secrets out about how they approach something or why they did something. And so NDAs kind of keep us from talking much. And so you will see here in a little bit, I will talk about a couple of successful customers, but I will be omitting a lot of details. But really the purpose of this talk today is to just help light a fire, grease some wheels, get you thinking about the possibilities that CODESYS brings to the table. So Electro Controls is one of these companies, and I dealt specifically with Brad Smith there, who is one of their chief engineers who worked on this particular project. So Electro Controls, based in Ohio, I've given their information here. So they're an integrator. They've been around, as you can see, for a very long time now, a very long run for a company, and they hold a lot of different certifications, and they have a massive facility that, as they're building out systems, they've got plenty of room to build systems, test systems, wire things, check things, do factory acceptance tests before they move on out. So very good, very active company. And like a lot of companies that have been around for a long time. I used to work for an integrator in Michigan myself. eh, Sometimes customers will specify what you need to use. We need you to use this certain hardware. Here's the memory maps we require as you're developing your programs. Sometimes customers will specify extensively what you can do and what you can use. Other times, customers pretty much just say, "I need a machine that works. Here's the factory description. Here's what it needs to do," and then you're pretty much free to choose what you want to use and program in the fashion you want to. So electrical controls kind of had that process for many years that if something wasn't defined, they let their engineers who were assigned to the project use what they want and the software they wanted, and they had total control over their project. So especially in the early days, these guys have been around since 1976. Maybe there weren't really a whole lot of options, and it wasn't such a big deal. But as the years marched by and you began seeing more and more controllers entering the market, they eventually began running into a problem where, wow, someone used, VIPA or what have you, and they left the company and, were not aware of how to use that, or, the guy we need is on site somewhere. We're having some issues with, this system where they used this type of software, this hardware, this method. And, they just kind of decided it was time to start reining in a little bit about what they would actually use if a customer did not specify anything. So they sat down and just kind of did an industry review, looked at a lot of different companies, different software packages that were out there, and they selected CODESYS, as they decided they were going to standardize on CODESYS specifically rather than a specific manufacturer, and not necessarily a Schneider or a Siemens or a Wager or what have you. They decided initially to that they're going to standardize on CODESYS, because from their reading they saw that CODESYS, I believe it's over 400 now companies, Chris, I believe, that utilize CODESYS behind the scenes.
More than 500.
More than 500. Wow, I'm going to have to do a mental update. Cool. so so we're halfway to 1,000 now, more than that, companies that run CODESYS in some way, shape, or form behind the scenes. And so they've decided that we should get acquainted with the software, and then if we run into supply chain issues of some sort, or if they just find that, hey, we need more of a motion bent, or maybe we need more of a component bent. Different manufacturers, CODESYS is CODESYS, but different manufacturers obviously can create their own specialties. You've got like a BNR or a Beckhoff that's more motion oriented. You've got a company like Eaton, which has a lot of different components. There's smart wire, there smart starters, motor starters, that sort of thing. And they've kind of crafted functions that interact nicely with all those different add-ons that they have. You've got a company like Phoenix where kind of our big thing is IT. So, we're kind of into, being able to do email, MQTT, FTP, SNMP trapping and things like that are things that we kind of bring to the table. So we've kind of, sort of customized our code to work in that arena. But they figured with CODESYS, we've got the nice base that we can reuse depending on the requirements that we come up with, the application we come up with. So they selected CODESYS mostly because of the universality of the software. But then there were some other things that they liked, particularly the built-in visualization, the target VisU, web VisU. They just found that to be a very powerful tool. It was much more flexible compared to some other um, built-in utilities they'd seen from other companies. And of course they were well aware they could use an HMI and whatever software they like. But the fact that CODESYS offered this ability to have a very sophisticated visual interface built right in with the same software that they did their ladder programming, structured text programming, really made this thing attractive to them. So the first project that they tried CODESYS on after they decided that, hey, we're going to make this our standard, but maybe before we officially make it our standard, let's just see how it goes first on initial project. So their initial project was the electric chicken control house. So what is this? Chicken house. It's for the longest time as we were kind of working with them on this project, we were calling it the automated chicken coop. But it's definitely calling this thing a coop is definitely not doing it any justice. This was a system where they were working with chickens, obviously, and each individual complex was managing 2 million chickens at a time. So industrial farming. Um, each complex consisted of two buildings of 4 floors each. So this is definitely a good sized structure. And they controlled it all from one Profinet master. And at least initially here, six Profinet slave devices, various of different sorts, drives, IO, that sort of thing, that they were running this out of. So this is one of the guys that was going to join me today, and unfortunately, I said he had to back out. But he was kind enough to send me some quotes and some screen captures for you to look at. So you can kind of see the description here that the purpose of this project was to automate most of the routine functions. So with a chicken house, you've got to turn off lights in a certain pattern. You're trying to simulate the day night rhythms that these birds are used to doing the feeding. You've got to ventilate, you've got to control the environment. Ventilation, I imagine, could be very important. You got to keep your fresh air going in there. And then they were doing quite a bit of power monitoring to make adjustments based on power draws, power demands, incoming power. With some of these locations, the power coming in could be a little bit dirty, and so they needed to keep track of the quality of their power. So um, they had developed quite a bit of alarming and email information, so that way the owners of the chicken house could get updates, critical updates, if things were starting to get out of whack. But they also wanted to build in um, remote access, so they could easily access the screens that were built to get their different get the different information about the layout, about the lights, that sort of thing, so they could easily access their visualizations. So they had internet access built in, so that way, they kind of optimized their screens to be able to run on like a smartphone or an iPad, so that way they could access their system from anywhere as long as they had some sort of internet access. So I have to say I was pretty impressed with these are just some of the screens that they built. There's showing lights that are on, floor plans, uh, fans that are being that are running. There were several very elaborate screens that they had built in the visualization software. They spent a lot of time making these. So, when they first began running into some problems with the controller that they needed, they kind of did a pivot. They're like, boy, we've done all this work. We really want to use it and reuse it again, and that's why we picked CODESYS in the first place. So, when they ran into this problem, they pivoted, and we were one of the first companies that they reached out to, partly because of this thing at the end. So we already had somewhat of a working relationship with them because of our networking products. They were using Profinet, but with two complexes of the size, well, I should say two buildings of the size of the complex, they were running into some distance issues with Profinet, with the copper cabling. And they were aware that we're going to need to at some point switch over to fiber and then back to standard copper again. And as they kind of noted here, he was Brad was terrified about this because he'd never really worked with fiber before and wasn't sure how it would go. But he had discovered that we had switches that, you know, had both the fiber optic and Ethernet cabling ports to make that part easy. But we also had switches that had, built-in Profinet support to support some of the different functions of a Profinet network. So we were already kind of part of the system from the beginning because of our networking capability. And our salesperson there had continually dropped suggestions about that. Hey, if you should need some more controls, if you kind of want to standardize, we do have this controller. We do run CODESYS on it. We don't have a controller and visualization combined necessarily like what they were going to be using, but we could, if there's ever a problem, we can help you out. So that definitely stuck with them, that when they began running into issues with procuring their first choice for platform, they did switch over and take a look at the PLC Next CODESYS combo. So, you can take the PLC Next platform, you can put the CODESYS on there, and it turns it into a CODESYS PLC with all the functions of CODESYS, including all of the field buses, that we currently support, Profinet, Ethernet IP, EtherCAT, that sort of thing. Fortunately, they are using Profinet, which we're already very familiar with. Um, so they put their program on that, and he said he just kind of commented on he wasn't sure how easy the conversion was going to be. He was told it should be pretty simple to switch between instances of CODESYS and different pieces of hardware, and it actually was. He was pretty much able to copy and paste everything, and port it from over one to the other very, very quickly. So the only real point that he had to, I won't say struggle with, but he was aware of this. You've got your IO variables, which were set up to talk with the hardware of his first choice PLC. But fortunately with CODESYS, it's just sort of a table. Your IO is just sort of a target, a library with its own point and click interface. And so it was relatively straightforward to just import the new IO modules and just go in and click and fill in the space with the IO variables that he was using. So it was very, very simple, and so the conversion went very well. So something he discovered, and this is news to me. I had not heard of this yet myself. There was he called it the CODESYS Persistence Manager, I believe is the term that he used. And he was running into an issue where as he was converting the CODESYS from his previous controller to the PLC Next, something maybe with the way that we organized our memories, perhaps. He was starting to run into some space issues with the PLC Next and was a little concerned if he was going to need to add a second processor or upsize to a higher end PLC. But he discovered this persistence manager, which apparently kind of reorganized the program and opened up a lot of memory. And then he had plenty of space to continue finishing his conversion. So that's something I need to look into as well. So he stated, from now on, I'm going to use the persistence manager on all my projects because it just really makes the space more compact. So you utilize the PLC next, and then we do have our web panels, which could run any HTML5 compatible software, including the web VISU for CODESYS. And as a result, they had a successful conversion. They were able to get the initial houses built. They built multiple of these, and then were able to build another round as well. So again, the universality of CODESYS, which is what attracted Electro Controls to CODESYS in the first place, they decided to do a project to explore the possibility of standardizing, and it ended up paying off in a big way, and that they were able to maintain their shipping schedules. So his experience was mostly positive. He did state just a couple of gotchas, that when you create a PLC master in Profinet, and he was using some PLC as a slave in one case. There is some stuff with the network speed, data transfer rates, certain standards that are created when you first set up a program. They had to go back and make some adjustments to that. The standards wouldn't work, but that was the only real hiccup they hit. Otherwise, it worked very well. They were very, very happy with the outcome here. All right, so the next company I'm going to talk about, it's one of those that unfortunately not allowed to name drop, and I have to be I really have to withhold a lot of details, but this was an interesting story, and so I just wanted to share it in a very, very generic format, I guess. So, they were another company that was attempting to do system simplification by, you're kind of used to having your controller and your HMI, your visualization tool, as two separate devices, two separate pieces, but they wanted to try to make their system simpler by, incorporating the two together. A control-based HMI. Not necessarily local I/O plugged in, but they wanted to have the two together, and working on a unified software was their plan. And then kind of have the I/O out where it needed to be. So again, this is a case where their initial selection was not able to deliver in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, we ourselves had some issues with the PLC Next platform at that time. Just the chip shortage, combined with demand, we were kind of short ourselves. But something that the customer did, and this was kind of all on their own, kind of with us kind of actively discouraging them, truth be told, saying, oh, we haven't tried it this way, we haven't used it this way. But our web panels that I mentioned previously, these are, they have a powerful chipset, they are Linux based, because it's essentially a specialized PC with a semi-closed Linux environment in order to run the graphics and handle the graphics. So it is pretty powerful hardware. I wasn't really aware of just how powerful it was, I guess, um, until I saw that. Now, has that been blocking things? But the customer looked at the specs and was thinking, I think we can accomplish what we hope to accomplish using this hardware. We believe that this can run CODESYS on it, which is what we've been doing all of our early development in. And I think we can put that on here and run that and take advantage of the visualization, utilize the Ethernet ports in the back in order to facilitate the communication to our remote I/O. And we're like, well, we haven't tried it that way. You know, this thing is typically just supposed to be a display, so you'd be kind of on your own if you had to do that. And they decided to go ahead and give it a try anyway, because just looking at the specs and saying, you know, CODESYS will run on anything, and this seems like this has more than enough horsepower to run CODESYS, and it did. You know, it worked just fine. You know, they had to work through a few things with our folder structure and where to put the CODESYS runtime on, but otherwise it you know, met and exceeded all of their expectations and has become something of a standard product for them. And since this experience with this company, we've had a couple of other companies now who were looking to do something similar, and we told them, well, you know, we don't officially support this thing necessarily, but you know, we have had customers use CODESYS on it. It's worked just fine, and so they have gone and they've utilized that. Okay, so another company that again I'm not allowed to speak of too outright, but they were a company. They were pretty quickly needing several hundred systems to put out in the field, and I believe it was to do some form of pump control. They needed the systems. You know, we needed a controller, we needed some remote I/O. You know, we honestly we don't care about the field bus, we don't care about Ethernet IP, EtherCAT, or what have you, but we just need a controller and we need remote I/O. So at that particular point in time, we were still having issues with PLC Next deliveries, and we also had issues with our bus couplers. You know, if you haven't worked in the industry much and you're relatively new, you know, a bus coupler is kind of a way to take I/O uh, that would normally be used on a PLC, and you can put it onto a network, say Ethernet IP, Profinet, by you put this coupler on, your I/O plugs into one side, and then your Ethernet cable runs off to do Ethernet, Profinet, what have you. So we were having issues with our bus couplers to take our I/O and put it on a network in the first place, but we kind of put our heads together and got creative, and that's kind of where the nanoline comes in. You know, the nanoline, as I mentioned, it's a programmable relay. It's normally used as more of a standalone basic control device. You know, if you're doing some basic conveyor control, maybe some basic ag control, just turning on some fans based on a timer, turning on a motor based on a sensor input. That is the most typical purpose use of a nanoline controller, but it does also have the ability to function as a Modbus TCP slave. That is built right in. And those of you who've used CODESYS for any length of time know, and if you haven't used CODESYS extensively, now you'll hear it as well, that you know they have a very nice Modbus TCP master interface built in. You know, it's like a very table-like, very graphical, visual sort of thing. You kind of check a box, fill in a blank, and you can do your Modbus TC commands very easily. So we figured, well, CODESYS and the nanoline, somebody could get us around this, and we could have talked to them about the web panels that the company in the previous slide used, but you know, our more official approach that we were more comfortable with recommending was our IPC portfolio that we have. You know, a full selection of industrial PCs that you know have different chipsets, different memory sizes, and different OSs. And this was something that we felt comfortable saying this would be our official way to do CODESYS in the absence of the PLC Next product, is that we could do this with an IPC instead. And so that was a route the customer opted to go. You know, they picked a PC that fit their specs, you know, created their control program in CODESYS, and they utilized Modbus TCP. You know, the nanoline didn't require much configuration. You know, there is a little bit where you need to tell it what kind of I/O are connected to it, but it's relatively trivial. You know, as any I/O that gets connected to it automatically gets assigned a Modbus TCP address. So you just have to know which addresses you're reading and clicking and monitoring in order to use it. But once the memory map was laid out, they were able to do a very large number of these systems. And so, CODESYS and PCs came along to save the day for this customer when they were in their jam. So this is the last company that I'm going to be talking about here. And unfortunately, as I kind of expected, I will be running a little short on time. This is another one that was going to join me today, but was unable to. PLOW Technologies. They are a large builder of end-to-end type solutions. So they will pretty much build anything that you need to have done. As you can see from their partner list, they do an awful lot of work in oil and gas and the energy industry, which makes sense given their location in Oklahoma. They have a close proximity to that industry. So I kind of staged them last because they don't so much fit the narrative of they had a supply chain issue that they needed to solve necessarily, but they were one that selected CODESYS because of its universality, and so I just wanted to make sure that we gave them a little bit of a shout out here, and for CODESYS as well. You know, One of their main things they do is they try to create standard solutions that can be used over and over and over again. Except for again where a customer may have a specific requirement. And so CODESYS is one of the products that they have been using relatively recently to build an easily repeatable system, regardless of hardware availability or customer specs or needs. So one thing in particularly highlighted is a software called OnPing that they've developed. OnPing is kind of it's a cloud-based system, does SCADA and HMI work, and so you can store your information in the cloud and access it from wherever. And one of the things that they were looking for to make integration of OnPing simpler, in general, they have, well, if we're working with Rockwell, we'll make a version that interacts with that PLC. If we're working with Siemens, we'll make a version that works with that PLC. But one thing they're looking at moving towards a little bit more is maybe kind of creating a black box of sorts, that this could be kind of a drop-in piece of hardware that then could interface with the controller kind of wherever it's at. So, they kind of liked CODESYS because the number of field buses that it speaks, made it relatively easy to select any kind of a PLC to talk to, plus the fact that, they also have support for OPC-UA and MQTT, kind of makes CODESYS an even handier option to pick for interfacing with third-party devices. So that's unfortunately about the extent of what I know about their application, but I was given permission to mention their name as a CODESYS user and enthusiast.